Otherwise, please join me in welcoming the moderator for our next panel, Brian Kingzett, Executive Director of the BC Salmon Farmers Association.
So I'm going to call an audible here quickly, just to piss Brian off. Just a few opening comments on this panel as the panelists are coming up. And I talked about the roles of activism versus conservation. And we're in a, please come up, please continue to come up. Right now, this industry is in the fight of its life. There's people from outside of Indigenous communities that have embraced this sector. They understand the challenges, they understand the concerns. They've developed transition plans to help them mitigate those concerns that are out there. But the playing field isn't fair because it's politically unpopular. We've seen the governments of both this day and the previous day turn their back on the nations in this sector. And it was so important for us to have this panel here today so people across the resource management spectrum understand how important it is to have these tough discussions. Because when the activists are done with this issue, where are they going next? And we have to continue to bring common sense to this discussion. I'll have more to say about this later, but I just want to thank these people for their courageous nature, some of their silliness, but their commitment to coastal communities and the First Nations that support them. So, Brian, don't be shitty.
Thanks, Dallas. Always count on you for those wise words of encouragement going into a meeting. Thanks, everybody. My name is Brian Kingzett. I'm the Executive Director of the BC Salmon Farmers Association and been working closely with Dallas and the Coalition of First Nations for the last couple of years now. And with me, we're just waiting for Xai'xais Robinson, the Deputy Chief of the Kitasoo Xai'xais Nation, who's texted me and said he was in the elevator, but we're going to start anyways in the interest of time. So I'm just going to ask the panelists, and we'll start with Diane and then David and then Larry to introduce themselves. There's Xai'xais, and introduce themselves and give a little bit of background.
Okay, thank you. And Xai'xais always shows up at the very last minute. He just
rock star.
He's a rock star. So big hand for Xai'xais. I just wanted to start by saying how much I appreciated the warm and heartfelt welcome that we received from Elder Loli yesterday in her prayer. It was a great way to start off this meeting, and I'll echo what Dallas said when I went back to my hotel room last night and thought about the conversations, the panelists, the words we heard. It was so impactful, and I think compared to last year when I was on a panel as well, it's ratcheted up, and it's so positive. So I'm really privileged to be here and be on this panel and have an opportunity to speak with you about what we do. So who am I? I'm Diane Morrison. I'm a veterinarian by training. I've worked in the industry in British Columbia for the last 32 years. The first 27 of those years were as a veterinarian, working with the farming companies, looking after fish health, food safety, and our staff. And for the last 5 years, just over 5 years, I've been the managing director. So Mowi is one of the 3 farming companies in British Columbia that are farming Atlantic salmon. We're based in Campbell River, and we work with and have agreements with 7 nations in whose territories we operate. I'm just going to give a bit of background, as Brian and I agreed, to help set the stage for why we're here and why we're talking about what we're talking about, because I don't think many of you live and breathe this as we do every day. So it all started back in December 17th, 2020, when the federal government made a decision to cancel licenses in an area they termed the Discovery Islands, but is actually in the territory of the Lakota people. And what that resulted in was the loss of 40% of production for the BC sector. And last year, for the first time, we had days, months, with no fish being processed in British Columbia, which was the first time ever in our sector, because we are producing a product that goes to the market fresh, and being able to provide that product every day is one of our business models. So that started it. And where we sit today is we are on pins and needles. All the licenses in British Columbia salmon farms expire on June 30th of this year. And we have been working with the government and waiting for the government to give us an indication on whether those licenses will be reissued and for what length of time. They are considering 2 to 6 years for those license reissuance. So we're waiting for that announcement. And then we have a separate process that is going on called the transition process, which came out of an election promise that was made and then has been incorporated into the mandate letters for the last and the current 3 ministers of fisheries, which says there will be a transition plan for our sector by 2025. So since 2022, when they released their document for discussion, the rights and title holders, the sector, and other stakeholders have been working, consulting, meeting with DFO to get an idea of what is transition, what that entails, what that means for the nations, because each transition plan will be led by the nation, and every nation will have a separate and different transition plan. And that's something that I think I heard yesterday. Governments have a hard time with flexing and a little bit of weaving. And this is certainly something DFO is having a hard time with. But as a sector, we are there supporting and working with the nations as they develop their plans. And at this stage, every nation is at a slightly different stage on where they are at. Some have submitted their transition plans and others are still working on it. So it's a work in process. So one of the other things I heard yesterday that I would echo, and it's looked for from nations and from businesses, is clarity, stability, and certainty. And right now, we have none of that.
Thanks, Diane. David, I'll pass to you next.
I think that wraps it up. Well said, and I believe everyone on the panel, that was what a compliment is that Dallas gave us, which is not something that I'm used to feeling or understanding, so thank you, Dallas. I appreciate that as well. My name is David Kiemele. I am the managing director of a company called Cermaq Canada. We operate here on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Currently, our business is wrapped up with all the processes, all the transition plans, all the discussions that my colleague, Dr. Morrison, is involved in. At the moment, our company operates in one area on the coast now in British Columbia. That is in the traditional territory of the Xai'xais First Nation, where we have had a protocol in place for almost 2 decades. We did operate in areas on the other side of the island historically, and as I've said before, some of those areas we have left, and we're okay with that. We tried hard to develop relationships and work with nations in those territories, but it didn't work out, and that's okay. However, there are other areas that we're looking to build on relationships that exist, and ultimately, maybe, if the stars align, re-enter into an environment where we used to enjoy growing fish before, but time will tell. A lot of balls in the air at the moment. Me personally, I'm not from British Columbia, but I'm happy to call British Columbia home. I'm an Ontario guy, so I was going to wear my Leafs jersey today, but I thought that would be a step in the wrong direction again. I've been in the industry now, this is my 25th year. I've spent most of my time in Campbell River. I lived in Tofino for a year, and I also spent 11 years in Tasmania, growing salmon down there as well. So, as Diane said, this is situation critical, if you will. We are farmers. Farming our fish takes time, and time is something that we've not been able to have for several years now. It takes 7 years for us to produce a fish that produces offspring, that produces smolt, that goes to our net pens, that goes out to market. So when we sit here today on April 26th, with all of our licenses expiring on June 30th, think about that. Thank you.
Thanks, David, and glad you're able to make your own maple leaf shot and I didn't have to do it for you. I'll pass to Larry, actually, and we'll finish up with Xai'xais. So, thank you, Larry.
Hello? Yeah. Utlama Anitzachis, Histakshitla Huet. Good morning, everyone. My name is Larry Johnson. I'm a member of the Huet First Nations. I have come into this this work, I guess, because, well, Xai'xais said it, where this industry is in the fight of their lives. Well, First Nations have been in the fight of our lives forever, since the beginning of time, since contact. So we have been used to adapting to climate change, adapting and making sure we make use of what we have and are grateful for those kinds of things. So I'm the president of Nuu-chah-nulth Seafood, which is a company, a commercial fishing enterprise that we entered into that program so that we could try to maintain a way of life and a connection to the ocean, because our people relied on the ocean since the beginning of time. And so, you know, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, just because, you know, we've been working as a commercial fishing enterprise to raise awareness and build capacity within our nations to meet this modern world. We have to have certificates of navigation and all these other types of things and we live in an information age. So this is you know, it's quite difficult for a person my age, let alone a bunch of fishermen and industries that are older than I am. And so, you know, the fight of our lives is definitely right in front of us, right here, right now. So, you know, our goals were always to keep the connection to the ocean, because the ocean was our highway. It was our way that we connected with each other. It was the way that we managed our resources and our connection to those resources. Our company, I would say, and likely a lot of the nations here live by principles, because we can't go backwards into time and have the world that we had pre-contact. But we can take those principles forward. Those principles are, to the Nuu-chah-nulth, are Xai'xais, interconnectedness, Isak, a greater respect with caring, and then U'athak, to take care of. To me, when you live by those principles, it's not hard to take it into your everyday work. It's not hard to adapt it and draw lines to economic development, sustainability, all these buzzwords that are out there today. It's not hard to do that. So Nuu-chah-nulth principles is the way we operate. It's the way we think about things going forward. It's the way we look at businesses. Is there going to be a benefit to our community? Is there a benefit to our environment? Is the participation of local economies? We fought long and hard in the treaty process to have the right to decide what we want to do in our backyards. And that's what some of these nations are doing with this finfish fight. But, you know, when I talk about, we've been in the fight of our lives just to protect our way of life, our world view, as we watch the world speeding by, being managed by science alone. And that's not good enough. So, you know, it's our responsibilities to carry ourselves in a fashion that's looking after our people, creating jobs, looking after the environment. The Creator knows what we've done to this Mother Earth since contact. We've sped up climate so fast that scientists are buzzing around wondering what is going on and how can we adapt. Well, I'll tell you how you adapt. You listen to the First Nations who have been here since the beginning of time, and we collaborate. Together, we work together so that we can create change. We can look at ways to diversify our economies and of how we lived off the land and why that was sustainable, why looking at things in silos don't work. That's okay if you want to drill down into it, but remember the world view. Remember how things are connected. So, you know, that's who I am. I spent a lifetime learning about fish, learning about respect for the land, learning about respect for others. And so, you know, I've tried to bring those values, not only from the way I live, but into the companies, into when I talk with audiences like this, or I talk to the federal or provincial government, because we need help. We need help, and we need to work together so that we can solve this together, not individually, not fighting against each other and claiming to be looking after the land. We need to find a way to harmonize. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. Isaiah?
So Xai'xais Robinson, the Deputy Chief Councillor of the Kitasoo Xai'xais Nation, and the General Manager of the Kitasoo Development Corporation. So I have two hats that have interconnected on this file so integrally. You know, when I reflect, I've been reflecting quite a bit actually the last couple of weeks. I did a presentation with my high school that I graduated 10 years ago on Tuesday, and I've been reflecting on how far I've come and where I am and how did I get here. And you moved to the res, and then here I am, and it's quite impressive to see how far you're able to go to support your community, and you learn, and how an uneducated or non-post-secondary student has come to this position and is now fighting and talking for its community at this level. And so, you know, Kitasoo is very unique when it comes to industry, when it comes to this industry. And, you know, 25, 30 years ago, we started fish farming our own. And it feels like I'm doing a pitch to a minister right now. And 30 years ago, we did our own salmon, and it didn't work out too well. We grew it. It wasn't as much product, and we weren't able to do it in a way that was going to be economically viable for us in the end. And so we actually partnered up with Nuu-chah-nulth 25 years ago. And so that partnership is if anything, the foundation of our success. You know, I reflect back and I listen to elders. My former CEO, who was a great mentor, educated me. My grandmother and my father told me about the overall relationship and what they had and they didn't have. And the evolution of Kitasoo and just commercial fisheries and aquaculture is long-standing. My grandmother was working in the cannery in the early 50s and so on. And so that ended in the 60s, and we had nothing as of the end of 1969. And you know, with a 5% economy at that point, you know, I reflect now, we have a 99% economy. 51% of that, 99% employment, and we have a 51% economy that's based on aquaculture. It's such a catalyst and such a strong foundation that we have right now with this industry that has brought us from a point of where having nothing to now having a strong foundation. And I, you know, as an Indigenous leader, you know, we don't just deal with the economics. We deal with housing. We deal with all these other issues, right? And so, you know, the foundation of you know, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for example, is, you know, having a house, eating, being warm, and all that shelter and stuff like that. And so that's a great foundation. As many of you know, is within Indigenous communities, we struggle with stuff like housing, right? And so at least we have a strong foundation with an economy, but that doesn't mean we're at a point of being we're successful in that point, but there's still other places for us to grow. And so I'm happy that our people are having something, a purpose in the end, a purpose. And because we dealt with so many social issues throughout the 70s and 80s that, you know, you hear within Indigenous communities. And, you know, I would never, ever would want to go back to that type of situation if this industry was to be taken away, because the remoteness factor, you know, we're 800 kilometers north of Vancouver, and it's so extremely difficult to have a typical day like we have down here is extremely hard to have in Clemtu in the end. And so we're extremely blessed that we're at this point riding on the coattails of our predecessors, and that when it comes down to it, this industry has been able to create stability within our community. And so I'm extremely lucky to be able to participate and to be able to learn and to be able to engage, and that you know, people within this industry have been able to provide growth in that sense for the overall community. And so we're at a point of great success, but we're also trying to figure out the next 6 years or 9 years and so on. So it's a unique situation we're in right now, but I have a good feeling that we don't have to, that the next 6 years your fish will be just fine, Diane and Dave.
Thanks, Isaiah. I'll get you hang on to the microphone a little longer. So this week, the Kitasoo Xai'xais are also getting a lot of attention in marine conservation circles because Kitasoo Xai'xais was just awarded a very prestigious global award, a Blue Park Award for the significant amount of marine protected areas you've done in your territory. And at the same time, you've now been fish farmers for over 30 years. How do you and the community balance that? You know, do you feel you can have it all?
You have to have your cake and eat it too, right? And so with Kitasoo, it's so unique, I would say. We have stewardship. Stewardship, there's a balance within the nation. Stewardship and the overall need for economy. And we've been very successful over the last 20 years with our stewardship program. And obviously within the MPA being announced in 2022, if I'm correct, of June, you know, we're protecting parts of our territory. We're managing parts of our territory, but we're also having prosperity within our overall economy too. So, you know, when we protect 35 kilometers worth of shore and we're able to still commercial fish within there and, you know, provide that opportunity to our community, you know, the overall nimbleness we have. Kitasoo has protected 52% of our territory, over half our territory in regards to the overall forestry. So we don't forest, we forest a total of 6% of our territory. And so it's very unique that we're able to be so, you know, nimble in a sense of what we're able to do. And so, you know, I'm impressed that we have the opportunity to be economically viable and protect so much of our territory. And, you know, this award just shows that we're able to do both in an effective way. And Kitasoo at this point continues to be very progressive. You know, we have the longest standing, you know, sea lice data and salmon data in regards to this industry. You know, we're very progressive. We are the first ones that signed this overall agreement with the aquaculture industry. And we have very, very high expectations, maybe my answer, within our partnership to ensure that we get what we need to ensure that the territory is protected. And, you know, we're moving in a way that's more progressive to ensure that this is not just today. You know, we're looking 7 generations. We're looking at the next generations for our people that we're not, for our grandchildren and stuff like that. The territory is still there, so.
Fantastic. Larry, I'll go back to you. I'm just going to do things in reverse order now. Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods, you're operating the St. Jean's Cannery, and I know that the coalition has some of the products up at the front in the trade show. What do you feel the future holds for Nuu-chah-nulth Seafoods and St. Jean's, and what do you sort of see as the strengths and weaknesses that are going to determine your fate?
I'm glad you asked me that. Very excited about our work with St. Jean's and some of the successes we've had there. Gratitude Seafoods is what I'd like to talk about, and it's based on our principles again. Our interconnectedness, respect, and taking care of. It's been a real interesting journey and learning and understanding about marketing, which I know about that much of it so far. Because when we first bought it, I thought we could move directly to an fully integrated company, but I learned very quickly that that's really quite not possible to feed a cannery with and be competitive to the harvesters and such. So what I learned is that we're really good co-packers, and they shine at that. And so when I found out how long it took 4 or 5 years for us to actually come up with just the notion of gratitude. We did some market research on the trends and things like that, and visited all of our communities. So what we want to do is just build on successes. We'd really like to see this industry get certainty. That would mean certainty for our company, our little company. We're the last standing cannery in British Columbia. I mean, everything is still hand-packed. It's not automated. There is things we'd like to do to build on the success that we've had there, and I said it earlier, it's collaboration. It takes a lot of fish to get into a space in marketplace. I don't know a whole lot about it yet, but I am learning, and I understand that once you're in the marketplace, that you really need to hold on to that space, because and for us, seeing that our commercial fish can no longer really fill that need, we have to buy fish from all over different places to find the grade that we need to be able to can, because we can't compete and pay a high price, because that's better off to be in the fresh market. So learned that about marketing and finding out how do we keep that space. The only way to keep that space is I'm going to need thousands, if not millions of pounds of fish to maintain that space. It takes a lot of work and expertise to not only understand that world, but to break into it and get in there and stay there. From our commercial fishing enterprise view, there was 25 enterprises created in BC. Now, all 25 of them want to do the same thing. We all want to tell our story. We all want to tell it through seafood. We all want to do that. Well, the news is that we could probably all do it about this good, this big, and for that long. But if we all work together, we could make this happen, and we could stay in the marketplace for a long time. So where are we going in the future? Well, we want to build on successes. We're looking at climate change, trying to balance things like economic changes, the balancing recognition, looking at ways to diversify on how we live off the land and how the resources that we relied on. I look at the land that we inherited after we negotiated long and hard, 20 years in the new modern day process. And what did we get? We have land that has been logged. We're buying into logging because we want to change the way the management practices are there. We probably won't see those changes in my lifetime, but 100 years from now, 7 generations from now, my hope is that our people will follow the plan that we've laid out, the foundation that we've laid, so that the future generations can enjoy the life that I grew up learning about. And I say learning about it because I'm still learning. And one of the greatest lessons I learned was that it doesn't matter how old or young the people are, is to keep your 2 ears open, because the world is changing and we need to change with it. So yeah, building on our successes, venturing out to identify and build on our partnerships, creating new partners, diversification of natural resources and economic development, working with things like seaweed, kelp, finfish, aquaculture, wind, microhydro for our own developments. Let's stop looking at BC Hydro to buy our power. Let's power our own economic development. That's where the power is. That's where the power of our people are going to come back. Data. I look at data in this world. I try to understand resource management and co-manage as a self-governing nation. And we try to understand some of the commercial fisheries and all of the resources that have been extracted. You try to ask for that data. Sorry, it's proprietary. Sorry, we can't give that out. Well, I thought we signed a partnership. We're partners. We're not just anybody. You're not giving it to the competition. So to me, we need to start taking the lead everywhere. Assessments, monitoring, leading economic development, leading reconciliation. My nation, the Huet First Nation, we found out a long time ago that you can do a lot more with industry than you can with government. So preparing yourselves for that strategy, working with your local, regional government, building those momentum so that when you go to the federal and provincial government, it's hard for them to say no. How can you say no when you're proposing reconciliation? And that's what they're touting. They're putting that out there through blue economies, through all these different buzzwords. We've been living off the ocean since time immemorial. Let us lead that process. Well, I'm watching ships being built because they want to use that place where we have a way of life for an economic highway. They're putting out ship after ship for TMX. What's next? The Saskatchewan pipeline. What else is on the plate? 2 LNG facilities. If anybody ever look at AIS systems to see what kind of traffic is out there? And we want to build an economy on that ocean. So it's going to take collaboration, collaborative processes, real government-to-government dialogues that respect First Nations' right to self-determination. First Nations need to take the lead in all areas, to share our worldview, not to replace or put anybody out of a business, but to build on successes, learn from the mistakes. I just learned today from a colleague that Barcelona has no clams. Why? They experienced something that we've experienced, and it comes from that economic highway. Green crabs, an invasive species that has wiped out all of their clams. What does that mean to me? Opportunity. Maybe we can grow clams to give to Barcelona and learn from Barcelona as to how did those crabs wipe out that, and what can we learn from it so we could do something about it here. I look at Canada and its recent budget. They put out, they're going to spend $15 billion on trying to create an electric car. Do we really need electric cars today? I don't think so. I'd rather see $1 million carved out of that gone to the West Coast here to develop aquaculture, to develop and show the world how reconciliation can work. Show how many jobs. How many jobs would that be? I mean, I'm sure someone in this room has done the math. $1 billion on the West Coast would be amazing. So, yeah, I better leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I think we've got time for one more question, and I'll throw it to Dave. So, Dave, Dallas talked about perceptions and realities around aquaculture, and the concern about finfish aquaculture has always been perceived risks to wild salmon. How do you address that with your partners in the past and in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Definitely a hot topic for discussion, and one to run towards instead of not acknowledging that it needs to be answered first and foremost. I think with our relationship, and I'll just speak to the relationship with the Xai'xais as a real-life example, is that you sit down and you understand what the concerns are, and then you work together. Like, there's so many red threads through the words you hear today: collaboration, in particular, transparency, trust. So you sit down and you discuss what are the concerns, and then you put a process in place to start to try to address them. Or maybe you learn about one that's not a concern, or something new pops up. It's an evolution. It never ends. But it's all about the continual reduction of the potential risk. And that is very much embedded in the way we operate our farms today, tomorrow, and hopefully long into the future. When you work together on a problem and you turn down the outside noise, it's amazing what you can achieve. We have standards with our agreement with that nation that are far more stringent than any federal regulator is currently asking me to do. And quite frankly, if you can look at it in a way, it's a gift. Because when you actually start achieving what they ask you to do, the trust starts to flow. And it's not about just lip service. It's about working on problems together. So when I need policy or amendments to put things in place to improve practices on our farms, I do it with the nation, and the nation does it with me. And that is a single voice moving things forward. It's not about blame, it's not about shame, it's about doing things better. One of the more frustrating things that's happened the last several years is, and I think this is across multiple industries, is when did it become just about not doing anything? When did it stop about about doing things, but doing things progressively better? I still struggle with that. So you sit down, you collaborate, you do the work, and then you are completely transparent about the results. And yeah, we hit some home runs, and sometimes we strike out, but it's all shared. It's all done under the banner of transparency and communication, and we explain and we move forward. One of the challenges, I just have to say this, at the moment with this uncertainty that's facing us all down day after day after day, is that there are more things that I could be doing right now, our companies could be doing right now, but that costs money, and it takes time to deliver these innovative solutions that I quite frankly think we've done a pretty decent job doing to date, given all the pressures around the licensing decision that is pending. We could have done, quite frankly, so much more today, by today, if the businesses had the certainty that we're begging for, so we can stay in the water and work with our partners on improving things and reducing that risk profile long term.
Thanks, David. So we got some questions up here, so I'll switch to those. So Isaiah, maybe I'll ask you to start with this one. I think this is appropriate for your community. Food security and sovereignty critical for Indigenous communities. Can you speak to how fish farming addresses those challenges?
No, of course. I think, and I could probably answer the third one there too, Brian, in a more holistic approach.
Have at them all.
Great, fantastic. I'm here for you. You know, I think for Kitasoo, this transition plan, an opportunity to have further discussion with our partners has provided us a bit of a sandbox, I would say, to some extent, with what our expectations are and what we see. Because what we're dealing with right now is obviously the Atlantic salmon, but our opposition of bringing up the wild stock quite prominently, and that this industry has now decimated the wild stock, Diane. You've decimated it all, supposedly. But it's not, and that's not the case, though. We've reviewed the science, like I said, the last 18 years and so on, and it's just not there. And so when it comes down to it, our expectation is to have this opportunity to be very proactive and to bring in the overall hatchery opportunities, to develop this partnership. Who better to raise fish than the aquaculture industry? And so when it comes down to supporting our community, our expectation is to really build out and help our community grow the overall wild stock in a very progressive manner is our expectation. And so when it comes down to the challenges, for example, that is listed on there to do all land-based, all our communities are very, very remote. British Columbia is already struggling with electricity, right? And so we cannot simply just plop these land-based opportunities in there and hope that they work. And maybe just to build off the quote-unquote opportunities, there isn't any. You know, the land-based opportunities we're looking across nationally or internationally, you know, they're not working at all, the land-based opportunities. You know, we look at the stocks and you know, as coming from a business background, the stocks say it all. You're investing millions and millions and millions of dollars into this land-based opportunity in Florida, and it's collapsing. You know, the return isn't there. It's a lot more work, and you know, when it comes down to our you know, the overall progressiveness that this opportunity for marine-based diversification of and innovation, it's very, it's incredible. But certainty is the big part. Our partners need to have certainty for the overall investment to come to fruition, because we're looking at millions and millions and millions of dollars that Kitasoo is expecting Ms. Morrison here to pump into community, right? And so how do we move forward in that way? In a good way, because we have you know, the goal is a 9-year license. But over the course of those 9 years, we have several indicators that are able to support our overall expectation, including the security and the overall development of the wild stock. It's very intertwined, I would say, both the Atlantic and the Pacific growth within the community.
Thanks.
Brian, can I just build on Isaiah?
Sure.
Because, you know, we're kind of a tag team. I don't know how many meetings in Ottawa we've done together. So we're good. So on the economic development, I think the frustration is another word I wanted to use today of the situation that we're in, because we're meeting with nations, Kitasoo Xai'xais being one of them, but other nations as well, and we're talking about what the nations want for the future with our sector, with our company. And we can't have those discussions because we're in this no man's land of uncertainty, and the government is not giving nations or businesses any certainty to have those discussions. And as Dave mentioned, 2020 was when the investment stopped. we could have, if we had been allowed to carry on sitting here today, we would have been talking about all the great advancements we had done. Nations are interested in more entrepreneurship businesses. They're interested in joint ventures. They have all kinds of hopes and dreams for their communities, and it varies by nation. But we're not able to enter those discussions, and we can just say we'd like to. Yes, we should talk about that. But without the certainty, without the clarity, we can't have those discussions, and it's very, very frustrating for as a business and as communities.
Dave indicated he wanted to add a little bit to that, and Larry, I'll ask you about the food security after David.
Yeah, it's something that's been quite a hot topic of discussion, the word food security, for some time now, and in discussions with the federal government, and sometimes it gets a little bit misconstrued. I have a saying, and trust me, I've said this a few times, and people look at me and they roll their eyes because it's like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But I personally believe and think that if farming done the right way, the responsible way, with our partners in the ocean, wild salmon should be in a better place if farms are there. And they're like, what the heck does that mean? Well, let's talk about food security for a second. Food security sometimes is taken that, we're giving fish to a nation to eat. Now, I have many friends in those communities that would rather not, to be honest with you, and that's okay, but it's what the farms deliver to support the nation's objectives when it comes to promoting their own food security and sovereignty. So part of working with Cermaq is ensuring that we have agreements in place that allow resources, infrastructure, what have you, funds to ensure that those nations can work on their own projects, and by no means are they directed by us. But we learn about what's important, we learn about restoration, enhancement activities, hatchery opportunities, and we look to see where we can help repair and restore what once was. And that then organically will deliver food security outside of the food that we're growing on our farms for these nations. And we've had some really nice examples of that on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and it's very rewarding work, and I think, again, it kind of ties in with some of the other red threads, again, Isaiah talking about the conservation awards, the marine protected areas. While industry is there, it can coexist. It's meant to complement, add value, not take away. And sadly, for a long time, look, yeah, it wasn't always done perfectly at the end of the day, but it's doing that now, and I think that matters, and it wants to do it more. So,
Thanks, David. Larry, do you want to add anything about your community?
Yeah, sure. Food security, I think, it's absolutely critical, and I think, again, collaboration, First Nations, you really need to look at this collectively and strategically, because I think we need to lead in all these areas, because when I look at the fish farm debacle, or whatever you want to call it, it's a catastrophe. Why are we worried about that? We farm everything else in this planet, and there's not a whole lot of stuff goes on. I mean, we have a CFI in Canada is probably the most stringent governing body globally. So, if we can farm responsibly on land, and it's no issue, I don't see why it can't happen on the ocean, particularly if First Nations are leading it. And I say that because of our holistic view, the opportunities that are there if we lead it, and if we can bring the local governments all the way to the federal governments with us, because I think international countries want to work with us. I'm going to speak to the transitioning on land. I think it's a great idea. But you know what? It's a long ways away yet. Probably the best analogy I heard about it is, kind of sounds silly when I first heard it, but you can grow chickens in a submarine underwater too, but why do that? So when I think about moving it to on land, there is a number of products that St. Jean's does process from land-based facilities. They're very small in nature. However, I think I have a lot of faith in our technology development that those things can be overcome, but that's going to take time. It's like the wild salmon issue too. You know, are we worried about genetics? To me, I'm not worried about genetics. I'm worried about getting fish back. Let's keep working on those important topics because they are important. But, you know, I think about the fish farm industry and what it's done as corporate citizens. I know my nation, we forced forestry to come along kicking and screaming down a path that, you know, we're partners now. And, you know, we understand each other's world views, or understand each other's economic views, and we're working together to change that. Now, if we could just stop and listen in BC for a while, that's what this industry is saying. If you look at the examples of up in Clem-2 and Kitasoo area, all the positives they've done for their environment, their community, the employment rates. And I look at where it can go. What if everybody did? You know, would our coastal communities be flourishing? Would we be using more than 1% of our coastline for the betterment to feed the world? I think we could go to the moon and grow fish up there if we wanted. If we let it, and we were concerned about the environments and all the things that we have a concern about. So I think that if First Nations lead, we can develop that collaborative nature. I even think that, you know, shipping down at I-5, breathing life back into the Jay Treaty. There's a lot of successful nations down there that have lots of money that like seafood, I'm sure, because we've been contacted. So I think collaboration, working together, using the 2 ears the Creator gave us to listen so that we understand each other. And because I think we can move this country ahead too.
Thank you very much, Larry. And on those great words, I think we'll end the panel on time. So then I won't have Dallas beating me with his big stick. So thank you all.
Good job. I told you not to be shitty, and you weren't shitty. Well, you know, this is how we motivate. This is how Indigenous communities motivate industry to get to the standards that we're achieving. I want to thank you all just for the journey we've been on the last 2 years. Every industry starts off in a place that it needs to grow from. This industry has done it in a much shorter lifespan than many of the industries in this room that have been given the social license to get there. And I think we've all made a pledge to each other that we're just gonna keep fighting for what's right for our communities until we get it. Just like we have in forestry, just like we have in mining, just like we have in other opportunities. And if people in North Vancouver don't like that, stay the fuck off my island. So I'd like to apologize for my vulgarity, but this issue gets my blood boiling. I've worked with Xai'xais and the predecessors before him. We've protected upwards of 60% of our territories. And the fact that we're still here talking about this economic opportunity in balance with the protection regimes that we brought in place, both terrestrially and marine-wise, is just frustrating that we're still at a point that we're fighting for the future of over 500 full-time jobs in First Nations communities because of the term social acceptability. So I apologize to the people in North Vancouver. Most of you are pretty good. But with that, I'd like to call this panel to a close. I'd like to announce that we're on a refreshment break sponsored by Grieg Seafoods, and we'll see you all in 20 minutes for an exciting panel with my little brother, Chief Chris Roberts, BC Hydro, and the Minister of Energy and Mines, Josie Osborne. Thank you, everybody.